Okay. So thank you all very, very much for coming today to join us to share some of your wisdom because, as I keep saying, the wisdom is here in the room. All the suggestions, everything we need to know is right here. And you guys are going to share with each other. And if you have not put your state on, and I think it looks like most people have, but please take this time and just go on to do that. The topic for today is best practices for engaging volunteers in planning for 2023. I don't know about you, but I'm surprised that I can actually even say that. I'm glad that I can say that, but it sounds like such a foreign topic to be able to say we can move to another year, but yay, congratulations. I think when I was 13, 2023 sounded a long way away, and now it's just a couple of months. But the first question for today is Dr. Mary Clark. Would you like to take it, please?
I sure would, Deborah, and good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to see so many faces from so many places. So today, my question starts with, what is one of the best practices for making sure that your volunteers are involved in the planning for the upcoming year? And let me just add an additional thought that if you or your team have completed the planning for 2023, how about sharing some insights of with those of us who are still working through that process? So can I see a hand raised or a virtual hand, a real hand? Who wants to share?
We've got Linda.
Linda, come on down.
Yeah, so a couple things we've done to get ready for it. Had a big volunteer call and just a member call and talked a little bit about what our priorities were going to be this year and just kind of made that as a hour-long call with them. And then the state director and I have called all of our advisory council members individually after talking with them about the upcoming 23 year and what to be thinking about along those lines. We've called all of the advisory council members. I've got one more right after this, so I've got to scoot out early. But just to find out what their priorities are and what their needs are and what they anticipate stumbling blocks, what do they need as we move forward. So yeah, that's kind of how we're doing it. And then we'll have a conversation after everything's been submitted between November and December, right? I think it's like the 11th or something like that. After that, we'll have a meeting with them and tell them how we've wrapped everything up. So we make that a big part of our whole process.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And just one more thing to add to that question for volunteers, how do you want to be involved in the 2023 process? So let's hear from volunteers. Let's hear from states who've already done it. JR, let's hear from California.
Thank you. I just wanted to share for my Veterans Advisory Team, we're actually meeting in a few weeks to do a strategy session and then to do our 2023 planning. And so looking forward to doing that.
Very good. Thank you. Who else wants to share? These are some great ideas. Great stuff is already happening. Kelly?
Hello, everyone. Typically, what we do in Ohio is we engage our executive council in the state planning, kind of the overall strategy part of it. Then when we have that really to a place that's comfortable to move on tactically, each of our ASDs and our three Cs is what we call them, Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, they get together with their teams and then start drilling down to the local level to see what they can do tactics wise. So the volunteers in each of those regions are really very involved in determining events, creating events, and then, you know, we of course ask them to follow up on that and, you know, get all the balls rolling, if you will. So that's typically what we've done. We're not going to change it up too much this year. So looking forward to working with all of those teams to see what they come up with.
Great. And it's a good example of if something's not broke, don't try to fix it or change it. So
Right.
thanks for sharing that example. That's wonderful to know that some things just remain consistent and the same and they work.
Right.
I think you call that a best practice.
Thanks.
I know there's some more ideas. Jackie Cooper, are you trying to unmute so you can talk?
You always catch me. I love the fact that you're so observant. Well, I look at things through a legislative advocacy lens almost with everything. And we do have a monthly meeting. And I think the ASD for Advocacy is on this call, Otiamba. And we bring the whole advocacy team together on a monthly basis to talk about what's going on during the interim before the session starts. And then as it gets closer, we start talking about trainings. So we keep them involved and from that aspect throughout the year, as a matter of fact. And we have 25 or 30 people in the advocacy group. So it can be a big meeting. So it takes some planning.
That's impressive. Wow. I know that there's some more people out there who have some things that they need to share, they want to share.
Mary?
Yes, Kathy.
Can I ask JR a follow-up question about his veterans planning meeting? I was going to put it in chat, but JR, is that virtual or in person? And what are some of the kind of the pieces of that or the questions that you're asking?
We're doing it in person, our first meeting in 3 years in person. And then the first part, Troy and Pete are actually coming in to do the strategy session. And then for the second part, we'll do more of our state planning, looking for 2023 goals and outcomes, and then also probably forming some committees based on the 4 veterans focus areas. So employment, caregiving, fraud and scams, and earned benefits.
Nice, thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there's no other, oh, Antoine, I knew I could count on you from California.
I was gonna try to be, yeah, okay. So
You can come on camera. We always love to see your face too.
I didn't do my hair this morning, Dr. Clark.
Look at mine, okay?
So to kind of dovetail a little bit on what JR was sharing, you know, from a broader California perspective, every year we do a survey, a state planning survey that goes out to all the volunteers in the state. And we build it every year to look a little different than the previous year. We try to get out in front of the volunteer opinion survey, but then we also do we do some clarity around the fact that this survey is for California state planning. There is one that's going to be following from the national, for the volunteer opinion survey, so people don't get mixed up and think just because they filled out the state planning one, they don't have to do the volunteer opinion survey. And we really asked them about their experience as a whole with the state office and whether they feel like the work that they're doing is making an impact. And then we also asked them about areas that we may not be involved in that they would like to see us get involved in. And we always leave another little carrot there and say, although you may express something that you think we should get involved in, doesn't mean it's going to happen. So we don't want people to get their hopes up when they mention saving, animals and things like that. And that's, we're not going to go there, but it's something that we want to hear from them on. And so At the statewide level, we do that. There are regular meetings, like JR mentioned, that various staff have with the teams that they lead. Some are geographical teams, like in San Diego and Sacramento. Others are by position, like veterans and other teams. And so we try to get that information from them to include once we start to go into our state planning process. And we have strategy map meetings that we have. Volunteers are invited to those strategy map meetings where we really dive into the strategic direction of each of our issue or priority areas. We all have, those of us who have to develop work plans, we have volunteer partners that we work with directly, not only in the strategy map meetings, but in developing our individual work plans. And then we have, someone mentioned earlier with the executive council, we have a document that all of us who have an executive council partner uses to have a very, very detailed and strategic conversation with our executive council members about different priority areas, their input, their feedback, so that again, we include that in the entire process. And then we do, we let people know during our volunteer recognitions, which typically for us happen in December, November, December this year, what our priorities are going to be for the next year based on the feedback that we got from them, this year. So those are some of the additional things that we do in California.
Great. A lot of great ideas. And it looks like Jesse has one more thing to ask of you, Antoine, before you go back into the Hinder Woods. When do you typically send out that state planning survey?
Yes, so we send out the state planning survey usually the end of July, at the latest, the very beginning of August. And we literally end it the day, and Kathy knows this because I usually bug her and say, hey, when is the volunteer opinion survey going out? Because we typically end it, we close it that day that the volunteer opinion survey is scheduled to launch.
Very wise. So there's definitely a cutoff and the starting of a new survey.
Yes, yes.
Great, thank you. And Scott, what does Kentucky want to share?
Number one, I appreciate Antoine just sharing that survey with your volunteers. That's a terrific idea. But in Kentucky, what we are beginning right now is we're going to begin meeting with the executive council members for 2 days. That'll be part of our planning process. Our communities of presence will be engaging volunteers to look at their local plans and the state plan as that sort of cascades down from the executive council. That's where I get some of my best input for my work in communications, is just from our communities of presence and their volunteer teams. So that's not rocket science, but that is those meetings, and we do get to go back in person, fortunately. That makes a big difference. So that's all I was going to add.
Thank you. That's great. Hawaii has a similar process to Kentucky. So all of these ideas are happening across the enterprise, and so glad that you're sharing them. If there's any more that you want to share, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I am going to turn the questions over to, before I stop, do we have anybody else that needs to say anything, or else their head will absolutely explode?
Mary, this is Ramel Cooks. I have
Hi,
something
Ramel.
to say. Hi, this is a call for AARP state office partners. They're all ASDs, and I'm a volunteer, and I'm thinking this is not for me. Is that
It is
correct?
for you.
Yes.
Okay.
We're volunteers as well.
Okay, I'm thinking you guys are all employees of AARP.
Oh, no.
Some state office.
No.
Okay, well, then I do have something to say.
Well, let's hear it. You're in the right place, and we want to hear it.
I didn't know if you guys had the same process that we have in Georgia for putting together your our state strategic plan. And I was just going to say, I'm in Augusta. And, our state has priority community areas, I guess, like everybody else's. And Our ASD works with two of those, Alice Bennett, and we have a planning sessions and we look at the community models for planning. And we've just finished a session that was, Alice works with our Augusta leadership team, and there's like a team of 5 of us who help her put together the plan for our community that then feeds into the state plan based on what came out of headquarters, I guess. And we look at, the community priority areas for us, and then what are our priority audiences, who are the target audiences we want to reach, and what are the goals for our community. And they're already kind of pre-set and based on those work areas. And I don't know if you guys use the same thing, whether or not you're the area or the project or the goal you're working on is an emerging, or if it's robust, or if it's sustained. And how do we move? We're trying to move everything to where that community is sustained on its own. And we as volunteers can actually manage it. That letting go process that you guys talk about.
Right.
When we get to sustained, we should be able to keep that moving because we've got the wherewithal. We know what we need to have as resources. We know what our weaknesses are. We know what target audiences we try to reach to move it to that. So we just finished going through that process where we literally examined all of those areas. It was a pretty long planning work process. And then what we just finished, we will take at the end of the month to the state meeting with executive council members and all the state office ASDs and other volunteers to say, okay, let's take all of what we did in Augusta, let's took what they did in Savannah and Columbus and Macon, and let's see how that all rolls into a state plan that will get us to where the state wants to be in all the areas of advocacy and education and building equity among the communities, people in the community, or targets in the community. So that's what we just went through. And I really love that we look at what are we not doing well in, and what that means you're emerging, because if we're not there yet, or we haven't done it at all. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It's how we get through it. And it's really a great planning process for us.
And that's exactly why we value what volunteers have to say, because we're out there doing that work. So thank you. You were right on time. And maybe I wasn't articulate enough when I said the last part of the question was asking volunteers, how do you want to be involved in the process, or how have you been involved in the process? So Romel, you answered it perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And Antoine has put some wonderful documents in the chat. Take a look at those. And Kelly commented that she's a huge fan of emerging, robust, and sustained model. So thanks for bringing that up, Romel.
Thank you.
Right on time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, before you pass it over, there is one other document that I've put in, and it is something that is available through the Exchange Library on the portal. And it is called just a bull. Well, I think, what do we call it?
A bullseye.
That's it. There's a bull something there.
Bullseye. We
Bullseye.
use that process too. We use that bullseye also as part of our planning process. We work, once we've
Okay.
decided what we're going to do, we take it through that whole screening session and go with a bullseye. Thank
Okay.
you.
But I wanted to make sure that if you haven't seen it, it is available. You can download it here from the chat, and or you can go to the portal, and in the Exchange Chatter, it is one of the planning tools that are listed. So,
Mhm.
okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Megan, it's all yours.
Thanks, Dr. Clark. Good afternoon. Well, we all know that we do so much throughout the year. And so I think our next question is really focused around how do we communicate to volunteers what our accomplishments are throughout the year? And then part 2 to that is, how do you build on those, or do you build on those accomplishments when you're thinking about planning for the following year? So part 1, how do you communicate accomplishments or impact? Do you measure impact of your activities throughout the year? And then how do you incorporate those into your planning for the following year?
This is Amber in Virginia.
Go ahead, Amber.
I would just share that whenever we do a program, a Zoom program, it's been easier. We get the feedback survey from the participants. And I'll always share that with the volunteers who were involved in the planning and implementation of the program. And I definitely base what the feedback is that we get on how we would do it again. So participant surveys and sharing those with our volunteers.
Thanks for that. Anybody else? Oh, come on. Do we keep it all a secret?
Can you read the questions again, Megan? Sorry.
Yeah, yep. It's how do you communicate your accomplishments to volunteers? And the second part of that question is, do you use those accomplishments or do you build on those accomplishments for your activities the following year?
So Megan, I guess I'll start out. That's actually something that I incorporate into the Andrus Award ceremony, is each of the different staff members will talk about just one accomplishment that they were able to make or push through, or idea that is something that they're working on. That's what we do, and it's usually it includes the kinds of goals and things that we have, but it's like, what are the wins?
Yep, and we do something similar in Minnesota as well during our end of year recognition. Barb, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, you're on mute.
You're mute. Yep.
I can only answer part of your question about communicating with volunteers and about how we acknowledge their achievements. We've just started, modeled on other states, we've just started a small newsletter that goes out to volunteers. It's different than the other systems of communication that the state office uses. And this one, we're trying to gather feedback from our volunteers about their experiences, mostly with the Speakers Bureau. And so instead of just somebody telling me what a great time they had, I pass it on to all the volunteers through this little newsletter that goes out by email. And some volunteers have wonderful things to say. And I think it helps other people to see the larger part of our mission if they can hear how things went at somebody else's event and who's listening and the impact it has. So we've just begun. I'm hoping it'll be useful, but it's one way to tell the volunteers that we are, as a group, successful, and individually they're having an impact.
That's great, Barb. We have a monthly newsletter in Minnesota too, and this year I started actually highlighting some individual things that volunteers were doing to help kind of motivate other volunteers to do similar types of things. So we had volunteers that made social media oriented videos for us for our advocacy campaign in StreamYard. And so we sent out links of those and said thank you to the volunteers and just talked about how easy it is. And if people were interested, to try to kind of recruit more volunteers to do that type of stuff for us, because that's, one of our needs. And it's been harder to get people engaged in that.
Your newsletter was one of our sources of inspiration, although ours isn't as elaborate as yours is. But I think it's, I saw that as a gap in our communication systems. And so we added that, and thank you for the model.
Ellie, go ahead.
I think I'll pretty much just say ditto, Megan. We do a bi-weekly newsletter, and we do the same kind of thing. If it's an advocacy win, this is what happened. If you want to be part of our advocacy team, then contact the ASD. We have a really robust Speakers Bureau, and we highlight them if they've, really hit a milestone of presentations or reaching numbers of engagements. We highlight them, and to join this team, please contact XYZ. So it's really the same kind of thing. And then also at the end of the year, we do a video that shows, it's not just an appreciation video, but it incorporates all of the wins throughout the year. So we go, by community, we go advocacy, and then kind of just the overall successes that the Ohio office has had.
Thanks, Kelly. And then Antoine put in the chat that California challenges themselves to increase the participation of their volunteer survey year over year, which makes me curious to know what your response rate is at the moment, Antoine, if you know it.
Arnett, you were going to ask. So, yeah, this year is actually the highest that we've had, which is 33%. And so we're planning to do next year to go up another 5%, which when I always propose that, folks, our planning advisor kind of looks at me strange, but yeah, it's a challenge, right? It's a marker.
30% seems pretty rocking to me.
That's what I thought.
Deborah, do we have more time for this, or do you want to move on to the next part?
Does someone have something they'd like to add?
Last call.
Okay. Well, thank you, Megan, and thank you, Dr. Muir. We're moving on to our third question for today, or third group of questions, and that is, how do you encourage your volunteers to become involved in or participate in any of these planning exercises? What level of participation is acceptable or desirable? I know Antoine just mentioned in terms of a survey rate, he's hitting about 30% in terms of people responding. But how do you encourage people to be a part of the planning? And from volunteers, what do you want to hear? What do you want people to say to you? And anyone can come off mute.
Well, this is
and
Barbara
share.
in North
Yes,
Carolina.
ma'am.
We've talked about how to make our volunteers feel more valued, to have a buy-in into what we're doing, and to show our appreciation for them. So we're in a unique situation, I believe, in North Carolina. We have 5 regions. Now, there are other states that may have regions too, but I'm in the coastal region, and I believe Shirley's on here, who's also in the coastal region. And right now we have 33 counties that are right, as they say, right diverse for the most part. The hub is in Wilmington, New Hanover County for the most part. So that's like the center of activity, but we have volunteers sort of in the outlying area, and we're working hard to try to bring them in, so to speak, and to make them feel valued and needed and necessary. And so what we're looking at is trying to come up with what we're going to call the team approach. We're going to throw out different topics and to see if we can get to gauge the interest of our volunteers in the 33 counties more. And so that's one of the challenges that we have, is trying to engage a coastal region of 33 super diverse counties. We have some counties up in the Northeast that are sparsely populated. And then we have some counties in the southeastern part that have more people. In many of our counties, they're a little more agrarian. As a matter of fact, Wilmington area is about the only, I think it's called rural/urban county. For the most part, most of our other counties are actually considered rural. So that's a challenge there for us to try to figure out how to best pique their interest in working with AARP and becoming volunteers.
Well, thank you, Barbara. Do you know that you just led right into another part of our question? And that is, so just thank you so much. Yeah, if you have finished your planning or you're very close to finishing it, or even if you're just still thinking about it, and this is for everyone, what are one or two of the challenges that you are facing now? And Barbara just mentioned the area, the number of counties, the agrarian situation. Are there some challenges? Anyone want to raise a hand or just come off mute and
Yeah,
talk about it?
this is Ramel Cooks from
Yes,
Georgia.
ma'am. Yes.
What we're finding, even though there's a really, really strong planning team or kind of a leadership team in Augusta, COVID, of course, we used to have about between 80 and 100 active volunteers in a community that's only like, 250,000 and a couple counties, I mean, outliers, not a whole lot of outlier in the area, but most of our population is centralized right here. And we had volunteers that we could just do multiple community activities, even on the same day. Like Saturday, we had a situation where we had planned some deep dive training for some newer volunteers that wanted to learn how to present our, core courses, caregiving, fraud, and, brain health. And so then we also had an event with Urban Ministries where we were doing a bicycle riding rodeo for seniors with tricycles, with the big tri-bikes. So now, because our volunteer corps during COVID has kind of shrunk down to about 20 people, well, when you have 8 of them are going to football games and homecomings and then you got 12. Now, how do you keep those fully staffed? So our biggest challenge is re-engaging some very committed volunteers that we had and getting them to be really active in knowing where we're going. Our state has kind of changed, the letting go thing. You guys somebody did that, and I think Alice let us go. So now we have this core planning team. We're kind of working on our own, not without her help, because she's never really just thrown us out there. We still have communications and all that, but we are going to have to figure out how to get these people back on board and how to re-engage them so that the plans that we're putting together will actually come to fruition, because you can't do that with 20 people based on how robust our planning is. So that's our big issue, is to get our people back and get them back involved.
Great.
Have some thoughts
I
about
100% agree. Holy smokes, it's just so hard to get people back again. This hiatus of COVID has really caused an issue. People are still a little hesitant. I mean, our COVID numbers are back up there again too. So even though it's not recorded or any of those sorts of fanfare, we're seeing that in schools and colleges and communities. So I think people are naturally hesitant.
Okay. Any other challenges or any suggestions for what people might do to begin the re-engaging?
Deborah, if I can just point out what Antoine has added to the chat is the California Connection, which is phenomenal. So don't look at it now, but download it so you can look at it after the meeting. And also Katie put in their weekly volunteer update. Fantastic. I mean, and these are some of the things that help to engage volunteers. And let me see, Barb is going to share hers in email to you, Deborah. I sent her your email. So these are all wonderful ideas that are engaging volunteers. And I know even just looking at these newsletters, I'm engaged and they're from different states. I mean, that would engage me. So take a look, download them now so that you'll have them, or just save the whole chat so that you'll have that information and use those as potential resources to motivate your volunteers. Let them look at other states and see what other states are doing, because that will give them some ideas that might spark something that can happen in your own state. But I love looking at other states' volunteer communications, whatever they are. And I know that there's many of them that exist, but some of them we can only receive if you provide us with a link to them, because they're on your private channels or we're not on your listserv. So thank you for your willingness to share those with us. And I'm stopping talking so Juniper can say something.
Thank you. Oh, you guys are so fun. I have a question for Katie. I was looking through this volunteer update. Is this the volunteer updates that come directly out of the volunteer portal, or is this something that you are setting up outside of the portal?
Hi, Juniper and everybody. We don't have great volunteer update on the portal right now. So we produce this using Adobe Express. And so we put it together, culling it from items that usually go around internally to staff, as you know, and but are not necessarily compiled into a single place for volunteers. And so we just do the work to bring all of those advocacy and events updates all together. And so you can see in our update that we just take out advocacy items, and then we have a separate section for AARP Alaska specific events, and then we do national events that folks can join. And so that would be like your fun and fulfillment events like Pilates or movies for grown-ups. And we have a really great response with that. And we've just recently transitioned it over from sending out a Word document, which seems terribly outdated, to sending it out on this Adobe Express link. And we've had a really positive response to that. In addition, it's a lot more mobile friendly for our folks who are looking at it on their phones or on an iPad than sending out a Word document. So Juniper, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. So I know there's a mechanism. They have these fancy emails that you can develop within the portal and push them out directly from there. I just wasn't sure about like have you had experience using that and it didn't quite work and this seemed like a better fit for you? Is that?
No, we just already had that system in place for sending out those volunteer updates through Outlook. And so in order to maintain consistency, we just changed where that information is accessed as opposed to the distribution channel. But definitely hope to use the volunteer portal more in the future. Just like I said, right now, we don't have a ton of volunteers who are on there. And so it makes it a little bit more challenging for us. It's just not a great place to reach people right now.
Yeah, it looks great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Katie, and thank you for the question, Jennifer. Anyone else? I thought Steve
Looks like
did.
we have JR and Antoine again.
Okay.
Unless Juniper she has her hand up. Do you have more to say, Juniper? Okay. So JR has his and then Antoine.
Thanks, Mary. One of the ways we also engage our volunteers, at least for our district liaison volunteers who work with their state and federal elected officials in California, I do host a open line twice a month, and it's following our monthly meeting. And so it gives volunteers an opportunity to contact me for one-on-one assistance, provide feedback, share ideas or thoughts, or to seek assistance when, especially they're a new volunteer, or we may be discussing issues that may be a little tougher for volunteers to deploy our messages with their elected officials. And so we found that to be another way to engage our volunteers, and a lot of them will participate from time to time. And it's been a nice way to get to know volunteers, especially across the state, since we aren't able to do a whole lot of things in person when we're spread apart.
Great. Thank you, JR. Antoine?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what I think Katie from Alaska, because we do when we send out the newsletter that I put in the chat, we do use the email functionality in the portal to be able to send it out because we're able, shameless plug here, but you're able to really track the engagement in the document through the volunteer portal. You can see what links people clicked on. You can see how many people actually opened it and read it, or just clicked through. You know, there's a lot of metrics that can be tracked when you use the volunteer portal as the mode to send it out. We still create it separately in I don't even know what format, because communications does it. And then we have a template that we use month after month, and we literally just drop in the different content into those sections. But it just gives you way more data to kind of see what people are clicking on, what is resonating, and what you may want to just think about taking out.
Great. Thank you, Antoine. I think that helps us. Anyone else? Oh, Jennifer, you thought of another question?
I did. So based on what Antoine just said, and I think that one of the challenges that we have in New Mexico is just capacity, right? To number one, really hone in on those features of the portal that can send out that kind of information via the portal, or even what Katie was mentioning. But is there anybody on the call now that has a volunteer who's leading that communication effort in terms of a volunteer newsletter? Guess that's a no.
That's interesting, because I thought we have had people before who, from a volunteer perspective, have been doing it, but we may not have anyone today.
I'm doing that for North Dakota. I just started. I mean, we sent out our first one yesterday. And so we're just beginning. I'm very interested in what you're saying about email capacity in the portal. I'll have to look into that and see. I'm just doing this basically for the Speakers Bureau, because the state office has other systems of communication. But as I listen to all of you speak and look at the really interesting formats that you use for getting these systems of communication out to the others, I'm kind of wondering if we couldn't combine some of our communication processes a little bit and find a broader audience that maybe people who are interested in reading about the next movie for grown-ups might see a bit on Speakers Bureau and open that up. So this is something I'll bring up with the staff, I think, and see how they're interested in moving on this. I'm going to look at all of the options that you all have presented today and consider them too.
Well, thank you very much, Barb, for stepping up and doing this. Antoine, it looks like you get to be maybe our last comment.
Okay, because I feel like the overtalker. I can't. Okay. Oh my gosh. Sorry. So just two things. Ideally, it would be great if we had a volunteer to be able to, or a team of volunteers to be able to take on like the newsletter. That is a goal of ours, but of course we're not there. We created a newsletter in response to the pandemic. So when we originally did it, it was going out once a week. Then we pushed it back to twice a month, and then now it goes out monthly. But that is something that we always ask the volunteers for, is content. Send us content, send us emails, send us information that you want us to put in there. And then the other thing is, with the newsletter, we actually are very strong supporters of interns. And we have an intern on our communications team, and that is his responsibility, is to develop the newsletter, the content, make sure everything lines up appropriately, sending it to the through the right channels internally in the California State Office for approval, and then making sure it gets to us so that we can send it out through the portal. So interns are great, and it's a project that they can have and own, right, for the length of their internship, and hopefully continue to pass it on if you're able to get more interns.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Antoine. We don't ever think that you're oversharing. We love your comments, just as we love everyone's comments. And so thank you all very much. We have reached the end of our time. I'm Deborah Turner, and if you want to send any materials, I certainly hope you do, dturner@aarp.org. I am a volunteer, though, but we will make sure that that information gets posted, and we'll be posting the recording of this meeting and we'll be going back through trying to download all the materials and make sure those are available on the volunteer portal under the Exchange chatter. So thank you all very much for joining us today, and thank you, Dr. Mary. Thank you, Megan, for holding your ends of the questions. Have a wonderful day, and I
Thanks,
hope to see you
Thank you.
next month.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great week.
Right.
The recording has stopped.
Well, it will if I punch the stop button. Is this what you say?